Well, let's turn now to our special focus and that big exclusive interview that we have for you. The American FBI Director, Christopher Wray, will be visiting India next week with a team of legal and intelligence experts. This after the US charged an Indian national, Nikhil Gupta, of working with an unnamed Indian government employee in an alleged foiled plot to kill a designated Indian terrorist on American soil. Now, this is an important visit happening after 12 years and is the first visit by Wray since he took charge in 2017. The FBI director will reportedly meet top Indian security officials, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, the NSA Ajit Doval, the NSA chief, the NIA chief, top officers of RAW and other intelligence agencies. At least that's what we're picking up from the press. Now, the US may well have its talking points. The US is expected to be talking about that entire alleged plot to kill Pannun and say, hey, you can't come and do this on American soil, and that may well happen. We, of course, don't know the agenda for sure right now, but that's what we expect will happen. But India is also likely to have a strong and direct message to communicate. India is expected to ask the United States what it plans to do to bring this man to justice, Pannun, the man who is at the heart of the US allegations, the man whom India accuses and doesn't just accuse, the man against whom there's direct evidence, including in his own words, making threats to blow up airliners, to harm Indian diplomats, and most recently, to blow up the Indian Parliament, to attack the Indian Parliament. Now, there are many issues out here, so let me just unpack them for you a little bit before we turn to our special interview with former Attorney General, top lawyer Mukul Rohatgi. First of all, let's start by Pannun himself. Now, just take a look at him. You could call him a joker, you could call him a cartoon figure, you could say he's a clown. Many people have done just that. Many of them said, is this really a terrorist whom you should seriously be concerned about? Well, maybe, maybe not. Let's forget. You may think he's a joker and a clown. What matters is not that. What matters is not the capabilities that he has. What matters are the threats he's making against India and the direct threats of terrorist action that he's putting out there in the world. And I think that's a very important thought experiment that needs to be done. Many people in the rest of the world say, why are the Indians so concerned about this? Why is India prepared to take such a strong stance on this? But I think at the heart of it is a basic question that needs to be asked. Supposing the shoe was on the other foot. Look, you can't have double standards. Let's do a thought experiment. Supposing the shoe was on the other foot. Let us say, for the sake of argument, that there was an Indian citizen, a self-proclaimed member of Al-Qaeda, an Indian citizen sitting, let's say, in Kerala or in Madhya Pradesh or some part of India. There's an Indian citizen sitting there and directly making video threats saying, we're going to do 9/11 again. I'm going to do a repeat of 9/11. How would the United States or Canada react if the only Indian response to that was saying, hey, you can't send American agents in to kill this man or assassinate them? That would be a very serious affront to Indian sovereignty. What would the US say? What would Canada say? What would Britain say? They'll say, all right, fine, maybe we shouldn't come in and kill this person in Kerala, but can you do something about him? He's making terror threats against our interests. He's threatening to repeat 9/11. Exactly the same thing would happen if you had I'm giving you another hypothetical example, an American citizen who is, let's say, a member of Hamas, saying that I'm going to repeat October 7th. How would the Americans react to that? So India's essential point is you can't have double standards out here. If terror is terror, you've got to act against terrorists. And you've got to act against people who are making terror threats. And if they are your citizens on your soil, and you don't want so-called death squads coming to assassinate them, that's fair enough. That's a fair thing to say. But at least the first thing which you should do is take an action against them. And I think that's the point that India will presumably be committing. India is going to be asking the United States, what will the US do? And if you can't assassinate anybody, and perhaps you can well agree that you shouldn't be assassinating people in friendly ground. And India, of course, is very clear. This is not been India's policy. We've never thought of assassinating anybody. That's clearly the Indian position, which they will repeat. But then the question will remain, what are you going to do about this man? By the way, the entire question of death squads or alleged assassination attempts and did it happen or did it not happen and how high up did it go if it did happen, those questions will be raised by the Americans. And let's face it, there are things happening in Pakistan which of course are also raising their own questions because a number of people are continuing to be killed by unknown gunmen in Pakistan. At least 2 major Lashkar-e-Toiba terrorists have just been killed in Pakistan. But that's another separate question which will roll out at some point, which maybe we will turn our attention to in another episode of the India Story. Something else that may well come up in the next week, especially when the FBI director is here in India, is this entire question of a differential reaction. This has been asked, and the Ministry of External Affairs has answered it. The Minister for External Affairs, S. Jaishankar, answered it directly on the floor of the House. Why has India reacted differently to the United States than it did to Canada? Well, 2 reasons, I guess. Number one, the US is the US, Canada is Canada. India has a different strategic relationship with both of them, so maybe that also covers the reaction. Point number 2, the way the US put it compared to the way Canada put it. We've discussed this on the show in the past. But the third, the official statement now made by the government of India. The Americans have put forward some concrete evidence and have shared it with us. And again, maybe the FBI director will do it. The Canadians haven't given any specific input. That's essentially what S. Jaishankar said also.
US is concerned, certain inputs were given to us as part of our security cooperation with the United States. Those inputs were of concern to us because they related to the nexus of organized crime, trafficking, and other matters. So, because it has a bearing on our own national security, it was decided to institute an inquiry into the matter, and an inquiry committee has been constituted. Insofar as Canada is concerned, no specific evidence or inputs were provided to us. So the question of equitable treatment to 2 countries who have, one of whom has provided inputs and one of whom has not, does not arise.
Well, for more on this, let's now talk to probably one of the finest legal minds we have in India, the former Attorney General of India, one of the country's top lawyers, Mukul Rohatgi. Thank you so much, Mr. Rohatgi. It's always a pleasure and a privilege speaking to you. Now, as you've been hearing this entire conversation that's taking place between the US, Canada and India over this entire Pannun question, alleged assassination plots, FBI director is going to be coming out here. I'm actually curious, what does international law actually say about issues like this? Mr. Rohatgi, when you talk about the rule of law, what does the rule of law say about cases like this?
See, I mean, before we come to the law, from whatever I have seen in the papers, there is no doubt that Mr. Pannun is a person who's wanted in India for several crimes. Yeah. He is an accused in several cases in India. He is a staunch Khalistani. He has been making and issuing grave threats, sometimes to blow up an Air India plane. The most recent thing I found was horrific to say that I will deal with Parliament of India and so on and so forth. So there is no doubt that, he is wanted in this country. As far as India is concerned, and I'm sure you will agree with me, we don't have a policy of having a Mossad type of agency like Israel to hunt down and kill people who are opposed to India or opposed to the sovereignty of India. So this kind of allegation by the US in conjunction with Canada, I think is absolutely nuts. There seems to be a kind of a crossfire in the sense that such kind of people will also have enemies within their own groups or organizations or community, etc. And some other material may be available, I don't know. But there is no way that the government of India can be alleged to have a plot for killing somebody, etc. Now, if the FBI is going to examine the matter, as far as government of India is concerned, the government of India must make over all the information it has regarding the activities of Mr. Pannun, not only his involvement in subservient activities in India, whether it's in Amritsar or elsewhere, even his activities abroad, which are targeting Indians, Indian diplomats in Canada and America. A full dossier should be made to show that he is a criminal, can call it international criminal, who should be tried not only by FBI, but by international criminal courts.
So let me just take you up on that a little bit further. We sometimes hear from politicians, from leaders in Canada and analysts in the United States that, look, there are freedom of speech issues out here. People in countries like Canada or the US can get away by saying X, Y, Z, but because they are covered by the freedom of speech. Now, I want to get your legal opinion on this. What Pannun has been saying and doing, if he's making a direct threat, for example, against Indian diplomats, if you're saying you're going to blow up an airliner, if you're making a threat against Parliament, and let's face it, these are credible threats because the groups that Pannun has been associated with have actually blown up an airliner in the past. In 1985, they blew up that Air India airliner. So it's not just a threat in the air. These remarks that are being made, does it come under freedom of speech, or is it actually a violation of the law? Is it an incitement to violence, and is it an open terror threat that has to be dealt with as a terror threat?
I entirely agree with you, Vikram. In no country, however much the right of freedom of speech may be guaranteed by the Constitution, as it is in India too, and as it is in the US, or by convention in the UK and some other countries, no country can allow such kind of utterances to attack parliaments of different nations, blow up planes, attack diplomats, say that their security will be threatened by such kind of people. These are downright terrorist activities and terrorist utterances. No amount of freedom of speech, however latitude a particular country may give to freedom of speech, everything in this world has certain borders. There is nothing which is absolute. No freedom is absolute to go and do these kind of things. According to me, this is an offense. What he is doing, even on the US and Canadian soil, those countries should take such people to task.
All right, Mr. Rohatgi, now, of course, the FBI director is going to be out here. India is presumably going to be making a certain case against Pannun and others like him. Now, I have to ask you, you've been Attorney General for so many years. If you had to make the case to sort of tell the Americans or the Canadians that, look, you're saying follow the due process of law, follow the process of law, and if you have enough evidence and you make a good case, then we're going to be taking action on that under the rule of law. If that's what the US and Canada are saying, then fine, that case needs to be made. Under which laws and under which system do you think India can make a legitimate case that the US and the Canada and other such countries have to take action against people like Pannun? What would be how would you make that case?
According to me, it's very simple. Forget what he wants to do in India. Let us talk what he is threatening to do in Canada and the US, because he's on that soil and he has dual citizenship of those countries, from whatever I have read. Now, if you are making open threats to kill people there, destroy or harm the Indian missions in those countries, harm the diplomats and their families, it is obvious that the local laws of that country will take action as any country would. I mean, if somebody is in India and who makes these kind of threats, we have our penal laws to take action. So the penal laws in America and Canada will provide enough basis for the law to take action against such people, because it is a threat to kill, a threat to commit a murder from an organization which has had a particular amount of similar background, as you have said. So what more is required? The utterances are there. And to say, and I have been seeing on TV some people who are of that bent of mind, who are egged on by these kind of people who go to gurdwaras and heckle our diplomats and all that, and these diplomats have to go away, etc. This is clearly a threat to security of individuals, security of the property of a sovereign nation, and an attempt to threaten their families. According to me, it is an open and shut case. What are these countries waiting for? What is this kind of rule of law? What is this kind of freedom of speech that you are inciting these kind of things to happen against a sovereign nation and its diplomat?
So you're essentially saying that their own laws can be quoted to say that you've got to take action against somebody like Pannun. But in addition, are there elements of international law that India can draw on? For example, the Vienna Convention, which says that the safety of diplomats is sacrosanct.
See, as I told you, India will certainly invoke the Vienna Convention for diplomats and their safety. But more elementary than that is that you invoke normal criminal jurisprudence in America and Canada and say that individuals, forget that they're diplomats, individuals are being threatened in this fashion by an individual who is a resident of America and has a citizenship of America, and therefore action should be taken. It has nothing to do with what happens in Pakistan or this, that, or the other. It's as simple as that. We don't need to look at any other law.
All right, Mr. Rohitgi, thank you so much. Got it very clearly what you're saying, and hopefully those in position of power will be listening to some of this and perhaps framing the appropriate replies and responses to the FBI director when he's here next week. Thank you so much for joining us.